I'm assuming you've read the post about revenge trading. If not, please do. This is a very, very important mistake that's very easy to make and can indeed be your undoing. But we want to get the bugs out of our mental software code and get our minds right. That's the objective of the whole lesson here. Doing this effectively will require an understanding of the nature of mental energy and how you can use that energy to change a perspective that is generating an unwanted, negative, emotional response to market information. Now, the process of trading starts with perceiving an opportunity. Without the perception of an opportunity, we wouldn't have a reason to trade. So, let's start our examination of mental energy by breaking down the process of perception. What are the underlying dynamics of perception? What factors determine how we perceive information or what we perceive in relationship to what is available? How is perception connected with what we experience at any given moment? Probably the easiest way to understand the dynamics of perception and answer these questions is to think of everything as a collection of forces. Forces that generate information about the properties, characteristics, and traits that make them uniquely what they are. Everything that exists outside of our bodies, all plants and all categories of life, all planetary phenomena in the form of weather conditions, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions, all active and inert physical matter, and all phenomena such as light, sound waves, microwaves, and radiation generates information about the nature of its existence. That information has the potential to act as a force of one of our five physical senses. When we encounter anything in the environment that expresses its properties and characteristics, an exchange of energy takes place. Energy from the outside, in the form of whatever is expressing itself, gets transformed by our nervous system into electrical impulses and then gets stored in our inner mental environment. To be more specific, whatever we are seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, or feeling through our senses gets transformed into electrical impulses of energy and stored in our mental environment as a memory and or distinction about the nature of the way things exist. The memories, distinctions, and ultimately the beliefs we acquire throughout our lives exist in our mental environment in the form of structured energy. You're now probably asking yourself, how do we know that memories, distinctions, and beliefs exist in the form of energy in the first place? Never mind that they might reform as energy structures. Well, here's what we know for sure. Anything composed of atoms and molecules take up space and therefore can be observed. If memories, distinctions, and beliefs existed in some physical form, then we should be able to observe them. To my knowledge, no such observations have been made. If they don't exist as physical matter, then there really isn't any alternative way for them to exist except as some form of energy requiring no physical space. If memories, distinctions, and beliefs we've acquired as a result of our encounters with the external environment represent what we've learned about that environment and how it works, and if they exist in our mental environment as energy, and if energy doesn't take up any space, then we ought to have an unlimited capacity for learning. And there's absolutely nothing to indicate that we don't have an unlimited capacity to learn. Unfortunately, this includes learning the right stuff and the wrong stuff, much of which is associative in nature and doesn't even represent the truth. I want you to use your imagination and pretend that I just set before you the very first price chart you ever saw. Would there be a difference between what you see now and what you saw then? Absolutely. Instead of a bunch of undifferentiated lines, you'd see everything you've learned about those lines between then and now. In other words, you'd see all the distinctions you've learned to make, as well as the opportunities those distinctions represent. Yet, everything you can see as you look at that chart now existed then, and furthermore, was available to be perceived. What's the difference? The structured energy that's inside of you now, the knowledge you have gained, acts as a force on your eyes, causing you to recognize the various distinctions that you've learned about. Since that energy wasn't there the first time you looked at the chart, all the opportunities that you see now were there, but at the same time, they were invisible to you. Furthermore, unless you've learned to make every possible relationship between the variable in that chart, what you haven't learned yet is still invisible. Most of us have no concept of the extent to which we are continually surrounded by the invisible opportunities inherent in the information to which we are exposed. More often than not, we never learn about these opportunities, and as a result, they remain invisible. The unknown quite often represents fear to us. Each of us has at one time or another witnessed a situation in which somebody was experiencing fear, when from our perspective, there wasn't the least bit of danger or threat. Although we may not have said it, we probably thought to ourselves that this person was being irrational. A top trader would say that your fear that is the result of previous losing trades is irrational because this now moment opportunity has absolutely nothing to do with your last trade. Each trade is simply an edge with a probable outcome and statistically independent of every other trade. If you believe otherwise, then I can see why you're afraid. But I can assure you that your fears are completely unfounded. As you can see, one person's perception of risk can easily be perceived as irrational thinking by another. Risk is relative, but to the person who perceives it in the moment, it seems absolute and beyond question. All of this has to do with the power of association. One of your basic objectives as a trader is to perceive the opportunities available, not the threat of pain. To learn how to stay focused on the opportunities, you need to know and understand in no uncertain terms the source of the threat. It's not the market. The market generates information about its potential to move from a neutral perspective. At the same time, it provides you with an unending stream of opportunities to do something on your behalf. If what you perceive at any given moment causes you to feel fear, ask yourself this question. Is the information inherently threatening, or are you simply experiencing the effect of your own state of mind reflected back to you? Here's an all too familiar scenario of that faulty feedback affecting you. Let's say your last 2 or 3 trades were losers. You're watching the market and the variables you use to indicate that an opportunity exists are now present. Instead of immediately executing the trade, you hesitate. The trade feels very risky. So risky, in fact, that you start questioning whether this is really a signal. As a result, you start gathering information to support why this trade probably won't work. This is information you normally wouldn't consider or pay attention to, and it's certainly not information that's part of your trading methodology. In the meantime, the market is moving. Unfortunately, it's moving away from your original entry point, the point at which you would have gotten into the trade if you hadn't hesitated. Now you're conflicted because you still want to get in. The thought of missing a winning trade is painful. At the same time, as the market moves away from your entry point, the value of the risk to participate increases. The tug of war inside your mind intensifies. You don't want to miss out, but you don't want to get whipsawed either. In the end, you do nothing because you're paralyzed by the conflict. You justify your state of immobility by telling yourself that it's just too risky to chase the market, while you agonize over every tick the market moves in the direction of what would have been a nice winning trade. If this scenario sounds familiar, I want you to ask yourself whether at the moment you hesitated, you were perceiving what the market was making available, or what was in your mind reflected back to you. The market gave you a signal, but you didn't perceive the signal from an objective or positive perspective. Think about this for a moment. If I changed the scenario so that your last 2 or 3 trades were winners instead of losers, would you have perceived the signal any differently? Would you have perceived it more as an opportunity to win than you did in the first scenario? If you were coming off 3 winners in a row, would you have hesitated to put that trade on? Very unlikely. In each situation, the market generated the same signal, but your state of mind was negative and fear-based in the first scenario, and that caused you to focus on the possibility of failure, which in turn caused you to hesitate. In the second scenario, you hardly perceived any risk at all. Again, the market doesn't cause you to focus on failure and pain or on winning and pleasure. What causes the information to take on a positive or negative quality is you and the associations you're making. Understanding, becoming consciously aware of, and then learning how to circumvent the mind's natural propensity to associate is a big part of achieving consistency. Developing and maintaining a state of mind that perceives the opportunity flow of the market without the threat of pain or the problems caused by overconfidence will require that you take conscious control of the association process.